face with this, okay?
To me.
Julie, you look great.
Okay,
The lighting is really good on your face.
okay, good.
Okay.
Like the scarf.
I had to add that.
Okay. So we've got live custom streaming started on YouTube. So I'm going to go ahead and admit all. We're up to 16 now.
This is our new century.
Oh, somebody's got some background on. Please mute yourself. Joanne, that sounds like you. Can you mute yourself? Okay, I muted Joanne. Okay, hello everybody. We're going to get started here shortly. We've been working on the technology to get it going here, and we'll start about 11:10 at the scheduled time, so we've got a few minutes. And we're up to 20 participants at this point. So So while we're waiting to get started, I'll see this for a little humor in the morning. It says no one's moving or saying anything. A bunch of snow people on the screen, and the other person says, I think it may be frozen. I'll restart. So we've got frozen snowmen here for everybody to look at.
It's in this morning's paper. It's very nice.
Okay, we're not here.
Yeah. Can you volume up just a little bit? Having a little hard time hearing you. Okay, and I'm going to try sharing the screen here to make sure that works for our speaker. We had a little trouble here this morning getting this going. So here's the doomsday clock that we're going to be talking about. And I assume you all can see it since I'm sharing my screen. And can you see that, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to stop sharing, go back to speaker view. We're up to 23. Let me see.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me see.
There. Now I'm on.
We're just getting organized for this this morning's talk.
Okay.
On this nice gray, snowy day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going on this.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Hey Pam, are you in California?
No, I'm home.
Well, welcome home.
Hello, George. Let's see. Okay, we're up to 27 people here. That's good.
Good.
And just so you all know, we're
I don't know how.
recording this. We're recording this and it will be on our YouTube channel after this for posterity. And
And we can get right to it.
yeah, I think so, Dan. I think we're all technology. I'm the Zoom host. I'll keep an eye on the chat. And Dan, as our forum host, can introduce our speaker.
Great. It's my honor this morning to introduce this January's Share the Plate nonprofit, Peace Action of Wisconsin. Peace Action of Wisconsin is a peace advocacy organization which works to abolish the threats of war and the threat of war and nuclear weapons. It is committed to nonviolence as a way of life for where human needs are met and the environment is preserved. Peace Action is one of the area's long-standing peace organizations. Their activities normally include a 1 hour stand for peace each Saturday at various street corners around Milwaukee. And we'll resume when the pandemic lights up. Also, for over 30 years, each August, Peace Action organizes a somber commemoration of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Morning, we are privileged to have the founder of Peace Action of Wisconsin, Julie Enslow, who will fill us in on the strong linkage between militarism and climate change. So let's welcome Julie Enslow. We unmute Julie.
Thank you so much, Dan. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice
Good morning.
I see some familiar faces out there. And I just wanted to start with some alarming news that came out a few months back. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists published its edition declaring the doomsday clock for 2020 was going to be pushed ahead to 100 seconds to midnight. They've never talked in terms of seconds before. It's always been minutes. But this time it was 100 seconds to midnight. And the reason that it moved up so radically close to the doomsday number of 12 midnight went beyond the normal measurements of the threat of nuclear war and included the threat of climate change, the two main existential threats to life on this planet. So the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists was actually founded back in 1947. The organization itself was founded in 1945 after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was founded by a lot of University of Chicago atomic scientists who had worked on developing the bombs and realized afterwards what they had created and brought many scientists together who had deep concerns about what their science had put forth into the world. And then 2 years later, they started this annual doomsday clock. And excuse me, that's my dog. But these two existential threats of nuclear war and climate change they talk about basically were the main reasons, but said there was an underlying concern of a breakdown in world order that is exacerbated by the United States foreign policies, especially under Trump. And that has really jacked up the whole level of danger. So I was, as usual, I follow this year from year. I've been working on this issue for many years. And I said, oh my God, 100 seconds to midnight, And then I reflected back on my own awareness of this and how it really began when I was married back in 1962 to Jim Enslow. And I moved into his house, and there was a stack of magazines that I'd never seen before, Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And it turned out that he had been getting it for some time and had actually been friends of one of the members of that group, Linus Pauling, who had been a chemistry teacher of my husband's when he was an undergrad at Caltech. And he became quite close to Linus Pauling and the Pauling family. Linus Pauling is the only person in the world who ever received the Nobel Prize twice, once for chemistry and another time for peace, as part of the Nobel Peace Prize. And so he was a great influence on my husband's life and perspective of things. And so we were members of SANE right away back in the early 60s. And SANE was the gathering of scientists that had started this organization for a sane nuclear policy. And so my awareness was really up there. I had already gone through the duck and cover stuff in grade school, I mean, a lot of us probably did, and which I thought was insane in itself, because it sure wasn't going to help me while I was crouched under my desk. If a nuclear bomb fell, I was smart enough to figure that one out quite young. But also then by the time I was in high school, I mean, things in the 50s were getting pretty hot as far as the Cold War was getting pretty hot. And I was maybe not traumatized, but I'd say that word could be used. At that point, I figured I'd never have any children. Why would you bring children into this world with nuclear weapons? And so I went on to work in anti-war issues throughout my early adult life. And as a result, I started to see that the nuclear issue was underlying all of these other things, and it was very present. In fact, the few months after we were married was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if that wasn't a jolt, you figure, well, this marriage is going to be short. We're all going to blow up in a couple of weeks at least. And thank God we were able to survive that. It was the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war, nuclear holocaust. So the bulletin has now reset that minute hand 24 different times since 1947, but it's never been this close to nuclear, to midnight before. In March of 1977, some friends invited me to join them at Casa Maria, the Catholic Worker House, to talk about founding an anti-nuke group here in Milwaukee. And it would be an affiliate of a national organization that was just being founded called Mobilization for Survival. It was a coming together of activists who were working on nuclear power issues and others who were working on nuclear weapons issues to merge into one giant anti-nuke organization nationally. And so we declared ourselves a local affiliate. And there were 12 of us around that table that founded this organization. Don Timmerman from Casa Maria, who's still very active, and many of you may know, and Mike Trokin were both part of that group with me. The rest of them have all passed on. But here we are many years later, and the organization known as Mobilization for Survival has evolved. So in March 1977, we were founded as an affiliate, and then we grew very quickly because a lot of things were happening then. There was the 3 Mile Island accident, nuclear accident. There were more introductions of new nuclear bombs. There was a lot happening. The arms race was really cranking up. And so we grew by, into a few thousand members quite quickly. And also the nuclear freeze campaign began at that point. And we were very active with that locally also. We sent 13 busloads of people to New York City in 1982 for the great big over a million people march for nuclear disarmament at the UN. And after 17 years as Mobilization for Survival, the national office closed, and we continued to do our work until 2 years later, in 1996, we joined National Peace Action, which had newly been founded as a merge between the old SANE organization that I mentioned before and the Nuclear Freeze Campaign. And they had come together to form a new nuclear disarmament organization. So their policies were so close to what we were doing that we really felt it would be a great opportunity for us to work once again with a national network, which could give us so much support. There's a lot of advantages to having the national organization behind you. And some of those are, like being part of the national lobbying efforts and educational efforts and concentrated campaigns nationally on specific issues. So the main the main policies and issues that we were talking about dealt with creating a sane foreign policy and nuclear disarmament, an end to wars, and to end to the international arms trade, and transferring money from the excessive military budget to fund human needs. Well, that's kind of our 4 main platform points. We changed our name to Peace Action Wisconsin at that point, and our tools continued to be education, lobbying, and public witness events. Now, what are public witness events? Well, that's where you really get off your duff and get out into the streets and take a stand for what you believe in. So we had, it included vigils and marches and rallies and sit-ins and die-ins and nonviolent civil disobedience, where many times several of us were arrested for nonviolent blockage of a doorway or a street or something. And then we also were evolved eventually into having these weekly stands for peace, which are at a different busy intersection in Milwaukee every Saturday. In fact, we'll be starting those again next week after a little break for this increase in the pandemic. where we have to be so careful of what we do publicly. So when we do have our Stand for Peace, we are definitely or 6 feet apart, and we wear masks and are very careful. We don't engage with passersby in conversations. We just, hold our signs and concentrate on connecting with the cars that go by. But it's something that many of us find to be a very supportive and encouraging thing to do. It kind of gives you a boost for the rest of the week that you've been out there and done your thing. So people know all over the city that people care about these issues because we're out there. We also, of course, as Dan had mentioned, have our annual commemoration of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as most anti-nuke groups do all over the country. And here we evolved into the Lanterns for Peace concept, where we, many years back, started to make these Japanese lanterns, paper lanterns, and float them on the Milwaukee River. That became quite a big event. We'd have 800 to 1,000 people that would come to that for many years. And for several years, actually, your congregation, the First UU Church, was a big part of that. They took over a lot of responsibility. There was a committee of people who were very interested in helping with this and taking on a lot of responsibility. So I feel that your congregation has a real close connection with our Lanterns for Peace event, and has always been very supportive right up to this past year. So Peace Action actually has provided avenues of action, opportunities to act and not mourn, and to not get lost in fear and hopelessness, but to put forth some real commitment and some real effort to making a difference, to making a change. And that's what has kept me going and has kept a lot of people going. It's an opportunity to act together, to really engage in meaningful change for a more peaceful world. And when Obama was elected, many people thought that the Obama administration would really make a big difference and would cut back on the nuclear weapons issues, and they would, get us out of the wars in the Middle East. Well, that didn't happen. In fact, Obama's administration got us into more war in the Middle East. They attacked Libya, and that country's been a disaster ever since. And they also started a new nuclear weapons modernization program under Obama, which is meant to last from the next 20, 30 years continuous. They have a long range plan to continue to develop new nuclear weapons and update the weapons that we've been having over the past in our stockpiles. They see this as a couple trillion dollars worth of expenditures from our tax dollars that will go into this nuclear modernization program. So when we talk about this kind of money, it becomes pretty unfathomable. You just can't even start to imagine what this amount of money is like. One way to look at it is something that I had found in a National Peace Action newsletter that came out, and they were talking about basically like a $746 billion budget last year. When you connect the Pentagon's budget and the Department of Energy's budget, which goes for nuclear weapons, that's totally separate, it's all separate from the Pentagon's, and other programs that are military connected, that it was about $746 billion last year. And this year is about the same that they have been voting on. You'll see figures like $705 billion, but it's really much closer to 740. when you add the nuclear expenditures that go to the Department of Energy and other issues that are also military related. So like how much, really is $1 million? Well, they gave this great little example of if you started right now today, you could count to $1 million somewhere between 23 days and 89 days from now, depending on how fast you talk, because it takes a lot to say something like 764,526. I mean, depends how fast you say that, how many days it's going to take to count that far. But $1 billion, $1 billion, that would take somewhere between 163 years and 244 years of counting constantly without taking a break to eat or sleep. Now you multiply that by, 700 or 746, and that is, unfathomable, the size of this budget. And, as Dr. King said so clearly, a nation that continues year after year to spend more on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Well, we have all of this happening on the military level. They're pushing now for more and more jobs in the nuclear laboratories and production sites. There's hundreds of new strategic missiles and bombers and submarines that are under development. They're all meant to target Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. The nuclear weapons plans are just chafing at the bit to get more money to design and build new weapons. Some of us have always called this the nuclear priesthood, that these scientists who have built their life around development of destructive nuclear weapons that could annihilate all of us. And it's amazing to think that these intelligent human beings would commit themselves to that kind of work. But the Trump administration has quietly and steadily poured billions and billions of dollars into the US nuclear weapons industry. And it's the largest expansion in that area since the end of the Cold War, with bipartisan support, by the way. It's both the Democrats and the Republicans all these years that have supported our nuclear arsenal, our development of, and the wars. How many Democrats voted against going to war in Iraq? One. And there's been, I think a greater understanding now amongst many of them. There's a much larger peace collective within Congress. And maybe if there's enough pressure, massive pressure, Biden could actually stop this nuclear modernization effort. But it's unlikely unless there's a tremendous amount of pressure from the public. Well, while all this is happening, along comes climate change and global warming. And this is another existential crisis. And it's caused by us, by humans. The same as the bombs just didn't come out of nowhere. They were planned and built by human beings. The climate change is a result of human activity. And we've known for years about the dangers of global warming. In fact, back in the 1800s, there were scientists who really were concerned about this as a phenomenon that was happening with the Industrial Revolution. So normally, the amount of CO2, which is the dominant greenhouse gas that holds in the heat in the atmosphere, normally the parts per million over the history of humankind on this planet has been 275 to 280 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And once the industrialization started, it started to climb up. And 8-9 years ago, it was 350 parts per million of CO2. And today, it's 415 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot to us, but the balance in the atmosphere is very delicate. And then there's other greenhouse gases that also contribute to the global warming, like methane and nitrous oxide and things. So this all really is focused. Of course, we're focusing so much now on the CO2 because it's the greatest contributor to this problem. And that really means fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels for energy on this planet. So wars have been fought for control of these fossil fuels. Oil, gas, the right to the pipelines. One of the main reasons that they wanted to get into Afghanistan was because of a major oil and gas pipelines that would come through Afghanistan. Since World War I, we've been dealing with this connection between the military and the control of oil, in particular, oil and gas. Churchill was the commander of the British Navy in World War I, and he's the one that decided to use oil for the British ships instead of steam, because it would increase their speed and their advantage by quite a bit and help to win the war. And since then, the use of oil and gasoline for the military has been unquestioned. And wars have been fought for control of these fossil fuels. And the US military, as being actually the largest single user of fossil fuels of any entity, and is also the single largest emitter of CO2 of any entity. So it plays a huge role in this whole thing. And it becomes a vicious circle because the US military will fight wars to gain control of the oil. And then the oil is used to fight more wars because they can't fight wars without that fossil fuel. So it's a circular thing that goes on and on. And then the amount of fuel they use is so incredible. They don't count miles per gallon like we do in our cars. It's gallons. It's actually gallons per mile, or barrels of fuel per hour for some of the big airplanes and fighter jets. But in spite of all of that, the Pentagon is the one agency in the government that really gets the problem with climate change. And they are starting to try to use less fuel, evidently, and to cut back and to do more alternative things. But what they really understand is that climate change is a huge security threat. They sent very detailed reports about this issue to both President Bush and then again to President Obama. And Bush pushed it aside and just didn't deal with it at all, didn't want to even read it. Whereas President Obama took it seriously. They warned, the Pentagon warned about wars over resources in the future, water wars, and wars for control of arable land for growing food. Massive numbers of refugees, climate refugees, that would be in transit and desperate to go to areas where there was water and food and safety, relief from floods and droughts. So we see this already. We already are seeing these huge numbers of refugees, and the wars that many of them are leaving behind them, hopefully, were started in many cases because of a climate disaster. Even in Syria, the central part of Syria was like a breadbasket area of farming for that area of the world. And when a drought came through, it was like a 10-year drought that just destroyed that land. And the farmers had to move, and they moved into the cities. And there was a lot of turmoil already. And they ended up being very concerned about, the government's oppression, and they joined in with a lot of the opposition forces. So the civil war that erupted really in Syria was fueled by a large part by this huge drought that had hit the country. So that's just one example. So there's often a military response to climate chaos. And also the rising oceans threaten the military bases themselves. The US has over 800 bases around the world. And many, all the naval bases, of course, are right on the coastlines, and with the rising seas, they're going to be wiped out. So the military has a lot at stake with this whole issue. And climate chaos will increase. 2020 has been declared the hottest year on record. There has been deadly, just in this past year, deadly heat waves and massive fires, as we all know, out in California. Last year, there was terrible, terrible fires throughout about a third of Australia. There's been floods from severe weather and severe storms, huge numbers of tornadoes and hurricanes that were kind of off the chart as far as the records of the numbers that occurred this past year. The increasing desertification from droughts, rising sea levels, extinction of species, the impact on food sources, the melting polar regions, melting glaciers, and melting permafrost, which releases a lot of methane into the atmosphere, causing more warming. So you start to see these cycles of more methane gases being released from the ocean, as well as from the permafrost, and increasing the warming in the atmosphere, especially in the polar regions, and then which makes it melt even more. And so you have this cycle that's happening, and some scientists aren't sure that can even be broken. They are very alarmed. Now, Peace Action Wisconsin is making the links between these issues. And a couple of us, my partner George Martin and I, have done workshops on this at conferences around the country and at world social forums in other countries, and to really know that we need to work together. The peace movement and the environmental movements need to be partners. We need to understand the connections between this stuff. And the fact that we're spending so much money on the military issues that could be used to deal with climate issues. And it's really time to understand that about $750 billion spent on the Pentagon annually is just plain bad national policy. As COVID rages around the world and the record hurricane season demonstrates, global pandemics and catastrophic climate change are the true immediate threats to our security. Fighter bombs, fighter jets, bombers, and missiles are utterly useless against those threats. midst of all of this, we happen to have had a huge victory. There's a big effort through the United Nations to have a treaty to prohibit the nuclear weapons, to make nuclear weapons illegal, on banning the bomb. And actually, a few years back, there was a vote where 122 nations voted in favor of creating this treaty. Not a single nuclear nation, of course, actually was a part of this effort. They tried to sabotage it. But once that vote was taken, there had to be ratification by the countries who supported it, ratification of this treaty at their domestic level. So on October 24th, Honduras became the 50th country to ratify this treaty. And that's the number that it would take, 50 ratifications for it to enter into force, for it to become legally a treaty and a legal policy for the world, that from this point on, there would be a prohibition of nuclear weapons. So that was a huge, huge event. And although it's only 50 countries, there's the rest of the 122 countries also need to start ratifying. And that's the process now, is to push them to do so. And finally, that pressure from those countries that have ratified will be turned on to the nuclear nations themselves, to get them to come on board, to start to do some serious treaties for disarmament. And with a lot of pressure from around the world and from within the countries by people like us, we hope that we can start to really push towards some more nuclear disarmament treaties between the nuclear nations, and some more sane policies. For, right now, the United States still has a hair trigger alert policy, which basically gives the president the right to push the button, and within, it's a 5-minute policy that these weapons are on alert. Within 5 minutes, they can be launched. No other major country has this anymore. There was very, very serious situations going on between India and Pakistan. Both of them have nuclear weapons, but they both had a no first use policy, and they had nothing on hair trigger alert, and they were able to resolve the situation without nuclear conflict. So we also, the United States does not have a no first use policy, and which is really, alarming. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we can still celebrate this treaty as a step in the right direction. In fact, on Friday, January 21st of this month is when the treaty enters into force, 90 days after the 50th ratification. And people around the world are going to be celebrating and educating around this issue. And we will here in Milwaukee also. Peace Action is having a local action at 12 noon downtown, where we're going to be holding banners and starting out at the Northwestern Mutual building at the end of east end of Wisconsin Avenue. Why? Well, Northwestern Mutual has $1.1 billion invested in nuclear weapons. Then we're going to go to Senator Ron Johnson's office, and then on to Representative Gwen Moore's office down the street. These are all just a couple blocks apart. And then to Chase and Wells Fargo Bank on Water in Wisconsin. Why there? They each have over $20 million invested in nuclear weapons facilities. So we ask people to join us on Friday, the 22nd of January, wear masks, we'll keep a social distance and be as safe as we possibly can. But we need to be out there so people recognize what has just happened, that this is an important move. So this push, now that since Biden has been elected, it provides us an opportunity to really push for some of these issues. It provides us an opportunity to influence US policy. And these are life and death foreign policy issues. And National Peace Action, which we're so lucky to have this connection with, has access to many people in this Biden administration's team as they're launching their new administration. And the National Peace Action has been connecting them to very high level experts on peace and disarmament. So they're trying to get the information and access to Biden and in influencing their policies. Also, some of the main policy issues would be a no first use policy and taking weapons off hair trigger alert, canceling the new nuclear weapons modernization program, and cutting the bloated Pentagon budget. And thankfully, Biden is taking the climate crisis very seriously.
Thank you, Julie. We're getting near the end of the hour, and we're going to need to take a few questions and answers from the
Yeah.
floor.
Well, let me just conclude with one statement. Is there hope? These are serious issues, and it's so important that we don't get lost in despair or anger or total hopelessness. The Biden election does provide an opportunity to influence US policy. And this new treaty is a sign of hope. But how do we deal with the reality of this doomsday clock, huh? And still stay happy and hopeful and joyful in life with this reality that we face? And basically, I think we need a community of support to work with and to help us, whether it's your church or whether it's a peace group or an environmental group. Every action we take and every single thing we do has got to be thought through in the terms of how is this impacting on everything else on this planet, on this fragile planet? Where is the balance in things? Whereas we have to bring an end to endless growth. And we keep on doing, not because we expect to see the total success of our efforts in our own lifetime, but we keep on doing what we do because it's right and it's good and it's the loving, kind thing to do. And that's how our actions need to be measured. And always remembering that everything is connected. Everything we do connects with everything else. So we have our own personal responsibilities as well as acting on this larger political scale to put forth some real solutions to preserving life on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I'd like to emphasize that the Peace Action headquarters is on 1001 Keith Avenue, just west of Humboldt in the River West area. So, for people to stop by or send an email to. I wanted to ask, unless there are any other questions, Julie, about the huge amount that Northwestern Mitchell has in nuclear assets. Could you tell us a bit more about that? I mean, what are the nuclear assets? I'm not.
Yeah, I think actually we had an article in our last newsletter where it did say that Northwestern Mutual has 1.1 billion invested in companies that are part of the nuclear complex. Most of its stock in Boeing, Honeywell International, BAE Systems, BAE, and Huntington Ingalls Systems, which I was not aware of before. And so we're going to be calling out Northwestern Mutual for its complicity in the development and production of nuclear weapons with these kinds of investments. Because that's a lot of money that they've invested in those areas.
Very good.
There are some questions on the chat. So do you want to take a look at those, Dan? While he's looking, let me just mention that this is Lorraine. Peace Action Wisconsin is our Share the Plate recipient this month. So I just want to bring that to your attention. And I did type the website for Peace Action Wisconsin, but misspelled donation. So I had to retype it. But, but you can use their website to make donations directly. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, sorry.
One question that is on there is, if one of the major nuclear powers ratified this treaty, if none of the major powers have ratified, what hope will it be to actually enforce the treaty?
Well, everyone who has ratified it, all of those countries, will not be putting any efforts into creating nuclear weapons, producing them or supporting them or having them on their territory. Like right now, we have a lot of nuclear weapons in Italy that belong to us, places like that. So if we could get those countries to pull away and say, no, we want to join this treaty. We're not building our own nuclear weapons, and we decided we don't want to host any nuclear weapons on our territory either. That'd be another level of pulling the rug out from under the nuclear complex. It's going to take a long time, I think, before the nuclear powers come around on this issue. And it won't happen at all unless we start somewhere. And this is a huge beginning. This is the place to begin.
Julie, there aren't many media outlets that describe what's going on with nuclear power. What are some good resources for the public to learn more about that?
About the nuclear power issue?
Yes.
Well, I always recommend Nuke Watch, NUKEWATCH, Nuke Watch. You can look them up on the website. They actually are located in northern Wisconsin, and they were founded by some, friends of ours through the work we've been doing statewide. And they have a wonderful newsletter that comes out and information on both nuclear weapons and nuclear power, constantly making the links. And the issues with nuclear power are often very controversial. There are people who feel that this was, we have to have that energy from the nuclear sources.
Yes.
There's also questions that the countries that have developed nuclear energy are the ones that have then gone on and created nuclear weapons. I mean, that's where they got their plutonium from, is their enhanced uranium. Is through their initial programs with nuclear power that then they were able to, and that's the issue right now with Iran, isn't it? That they're concerned that they would progress from their nuclear power position to using that ability for nuclear weapons.
Are there any questions in the larger group? If you have something or comments, you can raise your hand. It's been pretty thoroughly covered.
I see Ms. Thompson and Dennis.
Hi.
Thompson.
Beverly. Julie, wonderful to see you. Maybe you could talk about some of the things that people could do right now as part of Peace Action's work.
Well, for one thing, you join us on the 22nd at the demonstration downtown to celebrate this new international treaty to ban weapons. And also to actually contact the Biden administration's team that's setting up their new policies at this point. I thought I had if I could find that contact, I would pass that on. But to start to put pressure on Biden, that is the main thing we have to do at this point in time to influence his positions and move him towards nuclear disarmament positions. I think he's really strong on climate right now, which has to continually be encouraged. But to make the connections and say, listen, we have two existential threats here, not just climate change, but also the threat of nuclear war is still hanging over our heads and it's getting worse. So those are the things I would suggest right now.
There's one more question I see from Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Julie, for this presentation. Good to see you again.
Hi, there you go.
Can't wait till we can meet in the flesh at the 350.org meetings again. Question that I have about nuclear power and nuclear energy. I know the French have been using nuclear power, I think, very safely for many years, and I don't know if they that some of that goes into production of nuclear weapons. I know they have a small force. And the other thing is, an acquaintance of mine knows a lot about atomic energy, and he claims there's another way that we could be producing nuclear power that it wouldn't result in stuff for bombs. I think this by the use of thorium, and that it would be much safer and a lot of advantages. So do you know much about those two issues?
Yeah. Well, the last thing I read about the thorium issue is that it's very expensive and that it is not really really viable at this point. It's more theoretical. But the biggest concern about people going towards nuclear power as to help with the climate change issue is that it takes a long time to build a nuclear facility, a nuclear power facility. And it takes a lot of money, and that you could get a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak, so to speak, by going directly to alternative, safer alternative energies that can very quickly be put into action with solar and wind. Just, you know, they're growing by leaps and bounds as we speak. And we have so little time to turn this climate crisis around that the major concern around moving towards nuclear issues is the expense and the time. But we don't have the time.
And speaking of time, we'll have to pick it up at this point. I want to add one more good resource to learn about these issues is the quarterly newsletter from Peace Action Wisconsin, which comes out quarterly. It's written by Julie and others within the organization. And Pam has put her number and information on the chat line.
Before we close, I had just a couple things. Thank you, Dan. This is Lorraine again. Thank you, Julie, for being with us today. Really thorough covering of both subjects. It was really very nice. Thank you very much. The other thing is we wouldn't have had this wonderful forum without Dan's help. He invited and helped Julie become prepared for coming here today with us. So thank you, Dan. And also, I wanted to thank Bruce Wiggins, who is our Zoom host. And boy, when you say we couldn't have done it without you, we couldn't have done this without you, Bruce. So thank you very much. Thank you. And I think that's it, unless I can tell you about next week. Next week on January 10th, we're having two speakers. They're a couple who live in Wauwatosa and both very active. The first speaker will be Lisa Miller, and she has formed a group of very involved women who are called the Persisters. They persist in making change, and they couldn't figure out how to do it by themselves, so they came together and they worked together on creating change in our country. And so Lisa will be speaking about her work. Also joining her will be her husband, Connor Williams, and he is involved with the reentry program for people who are released from prison and the reentry into the community and how that's working, how it's not working, and what we can do about that. So 2 topics in one Sunday, next Sunday, January 10th. So hope you can make it. Thank you very much.
What time will we start?
We officially start at 11:10. That's when we click into everything. If you want to stop by a little sooner, you'll be in the waiting room and waiting to be here. So that's fine. That would be great.
Okay.
And if you want to hear a beautiful voice, Connor is from Dublin, and his wife, Lisa Williams, also is quite a force.
Oh.
So they are a mighty pair, a perfect pair.
Oh, I'm glad to see you, Pat, because it's because of Pat that we have the Williams with us next Sunday. So she invited them and had it all happen. So I thank you, Pat. So good to see you.
So we're all done this morning.
Are we done? Bruce, anything else you need to add or do?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Julie. Yes. Happy it's a new year.
Thank you, Julie. Good